Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you're all busy people, but hopefully we will entertain and engage you today with what should be a very broad range of different subjects. For those that are new to Pimento, a huge welcome to all of you. I'm Stephen Knight, I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. As you just heard, we're going to record today's session. That's for people who are unable to make it. I think we have just over 100 people register for today's event. If you're watching this on catch up on our video channel on YouTube, don't vote. You'll be charged for it and your votes won't count. Obviously, very topical at the moment. And please do turn on your cameras and smile throughout. It's always good to see you. And particularly as I'm sure you're all enjoying the fine weather, sitting in your gardens in this beautiful summer's day. Do use the chat box. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you're not familiar with Zoom, it's at the bottom of the screen. We want to make the session as interactive as possible, and we'll get the opportunity to ask Oliver and Annabel, our two speakers today, as long with myself, for any questions relating to the data they're going to share with you. It's a welcome back. I think we've been doing this now for nearly 4 years, from Oliver Wright, who's the head of public and corporate at Insight Research and polling agency Savanta, and Annabel Dunstan, who's the founder and CEO of Question and Retain. They're also an insight agency, and they specialize in helping businesses, particularly agencies, to listen better to their clients, employees, stakeholders, and members. So, quick reminder, we all share a copy of today's presentation along with the deck, and if you want to use any of the facts or any of the slides in today's presentation, you are at liberty to do so. Just please do credit Savanta and Question and Retain along with their sponsors, Pimento and the Alliance. And without further ado, we're going to start now with Oliver. Oliver, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously been a busy boy in the last few weeks. It's great to have you with us. Okay, and you should be able to see Oliver's slides on screen now.
Great, thank you, Stephen, and hello everybody. Good to be back for those of you who've heard me talk through some of our polling before. So yeah, it's been a very busy, very interesting few weeks for us at Savanta with all of the polling we've been doing in the pre-election period. So I'm just going to give you, I suppose, an oversight of some of the key trends we've been seeing, or we have been seeing in the run-up to the election. Obviously, there's been a Labour landslide as of last week, something that the polling industry correctly predicted. There was a little bit of a dip in the overall share of Labour vote, some of which was picked up by the polling, but probably not to the full extent. And obviously there was quite a lot of uncertainty and new things to think about this time. Turnout was lower, which we maybe weren't expecting. Obviously Reform was suddenly a much bigger player as the campaign went on than maybe we would have expected at the start of the campaign. But yeah, we've had a lot of profile over the last 6 weeks or so, which is what we aim for with an election. It's a chance for us to showcase what we can do and get our name in the newspapers and some of our colleagues commenting across the media. And before I go into some of the data, I think one thing we were maybe not expecting in terms of how we might raise our profile is came directly from Nigel Farage, who about halfway through the campaign named us and one competitor for well, in his words, I think he was not happy with the way that we were representing them in our polling, and he thought we were undercooking kind of their vote share, which meant that we, given the profile he has, meant that we got some unexpected profile from that, and all publicity is good publicity. We were doing absolutely nothing wrong, and we actually got quite close in the end to predicting what their final vote share would be. But it was nice to get that extra profile and be on the front page of the likes of the Express at his will, as it seemed. But anyway, I'll move on to some of the trends and the data. So I'm not going to look at the voting intention, because the actual voting intention was what was shown last week on last Thursday. But one of the measures that we use alongside our voting intention to try and sort of understand the lay of the land is tracking who the public think will be the best Prime Minister. And you can see there that Keir Starmer ended up being very, very clear of Rishi Sunak in that regard. And those percentages, 45 to 28, broadly, not exactly, but broadly mirroring the voting intention that we'd seen running over the weeks in the lead up to the election. You can see from this slide that the trend really widened during that pre-election period. So that's the shaded bit on the right. Keir Starmer's rating went up and Sunak's dipped. So he was increasingly seen as Prime Minister material, or at least clearly a better alternative than Sunak amongst the public as the election campaign went on. We don't know exactly what contributed to that, but we do know that things like Sunak's D-Day gaffe didn't go down very well with the public. Interestingly, though, 27% were still saying don't know in the days running up to the election, which may explain partly at least kind of the industry overestimating the eventual vote share of Labour. And things like lower turnout kind of reflected in that as well. I think change was a word used a lot by Labour in the run up to the election, and that certainly cut through in some of the polling that we did. That was in terms of sort of unprompted recall, that was a phrase that people could recall quite regularly, actually, and much more so than some of Sunak's phrases he tried to use, like bold action, clear plan. That change word really cut through. And we asked kind of, the public whether they felt this was a watershed moment, and they very much do think that across all age groups. I think people see this as a line in the sand, and change cut through, but there's a real expectation now as to what that change is going to be. I think people have high expectations for moving on from this point, and hopefully for people to see some positive change. That said, a clear majority said, we polled this after election day after, voters wanting the end of the Conservatives was actually the biggest factor in Labour's victory, as opposed to actively wanting a Labour government. That's very much a narrative that has been spun by the likes of the Conservatives and Reform as well post-election. Those two factors are probably intertwined a little bit, but when forced to choose, I think that's how people saw the reason, not necessarily for themselves voting, but why the electorate voted as they did. Again, thinking about some reasons why we saw the result that we did. In the weeks running up to the election, we polled people on which of the following politicians, Starmer or Sunak, do you think is best placed to manage each of the following issues? So all of these policy areas. And Starmer was beating Sunak on every single policy area. Even the economy, that was the narrowest, but every single policy area, Starmer was winning. And then thinking about what people were thinking of when they were deciding who to vote for, the biggest issues were the cost of living, health and the NHS, the economy. So these are going to be the areas now which people want to see prioritised, and where they want to see this change that Labour have been promising. I think obviously inflation has got back to a more normal level, but people are still very much feeling the impact of inflation over the last couple of years in terms of their pockets and their bills. Having said all that, there is overall positive sentiment towards a Labour government. You see in the middle there, half are optimistic, which is greater than the proportion that actually voted Labour in the end. More people are happy than sad, but fewer are kind of excited. There's some indifference in there. There's very similar proportions of people who are saying they're excited and say they're fearful. So I think there's still some wait and see from a lot of people. Excitement is probably too early to be excited. People want to see that evidence of positive change. In terms of the overall mood of the nation, we ran this poll a few weeks before the election, and the public are really quite mixed at the moment. And on one hand, they're saying they're happy and optimistic. On the other hand, actually, the most common words used are anxious and stressed. And when you look at on the right-hand side, we asked about it, in terms of the current political climate, is actually very sort of negative sentiment. Words like anxious, stressed, fearful, angry are the ones that come through the most. So I think people do want to draw that line in the sand, as I say, and move forward and, see the back of some of the political events of the last few years and hopefully see, as I say, again, some positive change that's going to impact them and the population. Finally, on the general public, how does this sort of translate into overall confidence in the direction the country is headed? So the majority are actually less confident than they were a year ago, 55% as opposed to 36%. The picture is a little bit more even for younger people, 47% less confident, 43% more confident. I think the overall figures here, again, just sort of show that people are kind of really wanting to see some positive change going forward. I just wanted to pause at this point and reflect just on some of the broader patterns that we've seen amongst young people. So not on the slides, but the majority of 18 to 25s say that UK politicians don't care or listen to young people, and 2/3 have little or no trust in UK politics. So while as a whole, they're, you know, also overwhelmingly most likely to vote Labour, there are some differences by gender, which is really interesting. So, for example, males were much more likely to vote Conservative or Reform. And actually, there was a poll out from someone else in the week before the election, which showed that as Labour want to do and give the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds, Reform, I think, were the second most popular party amongst that group, if they were allowed to vote, behind Labour. And for males, 16 to 17-year-olds, Reform were the most popular party. And also, some of our polling there shows that females are much less likely to be optimistic for the future, much more pessimistic on a range of issues. So I think maybe more so than other generations, gender plays a massive role in how people are feeling and who they're likely to vote for when it comes to the very youngest generations, those sort of 18 to 25s. I suppose reflecting on what that might mean in terms of marketing to this generation, it is going to be really important to factor in those gender differences. I think we also know that TikTok was used heavily by Reform in the run-up to the election. And I think some of these numbers show that maybe that cut through, particularly with males. But, you know, women are quite worried about the future, and men, I think, more disillusioned, looking for a home, looking for role models. So I don't know what that means in terms of translating into sort of broader marketing towards that young group of people. Moving on to the business outlook. So businesses also had a really clear preference for Labour. This question was asking, you know, who is going to be best for businesses in the UK? And you can see there the latest polls are sort of showing Labour leading 49 to 32. And if anything, that gap widened as the year went on. And that doesn't really vary compared with if you compare sort of small and large businesses either. There was also a very clear preference for Keir Starmer, as we saw with the best Prime Minister rating for the public, translates into businesses as well. Interestingly here, we see that the smaller businesses in our tracker, so SMEs, more likely to say neither here than either of them. And Sunak, there's no difference there. He's not very popular with any size of business. But there's perhaps some uncertainty as to what either of these party leaders are going to bring for small businesses. Interestingly, despite the Conservative Party's attempts to paint Rayner as anti-business, she's seen as very much preferred to who was the Deputy Prime Minister previously, Oliver Dowden. I think Rayner's been really clear in her commitments regards to a new deal for working people through an employment rights bill, including things like banning exploitative zero-hour contracts and also fire and rehire practices. So despite the Conservatives' attempts to paint this negatively for businesses, she does remain a relatively popular figure compared to the Conservative alternative. And that's particularly true of larger businesses, again. Rachel Reeves does hold a lead over Jeremy Hunt in terms of preference. That gap is much smaller. But there is, again, trends here, I think, by business side, so generally more ambivalence, or maybe being less convinced by both main parties amongst the smaller businesses who are much more likely to choose neither or don't know on all of these head-to-head choices. And this pattern is maybe reflected in the perceived impact of a new government. So while half businesses say they will make changes or have made changes in preparation for a Labour government, this really varies by business size. Small businesses, half say they won't be making any changes at all, whereas larger businesses, 2/3 said they either have or they plan to do so. Underlying all of this, I think businesses continue to face the same challenges they have for the past couple of years, quite fundamental challenges namely the effects of inflation. We saw that was going to be a key voting criteria for the general public. It's still a key challenge for businesses that they expect in the next 12 months. And alongside that, just fundamentally remaining profitable and competitive in the marketplace as well. I've got a few slides on business confidence from a few different sources. First of all, this is our Market View Business Confidence Survey. It's run quarterly amongst 2,500 British businesses, from startups through to businesses with over £1 billion in turnover. What you can see there is it's remained pretty steady from the start of last year through to Q1 this year. We don't have Q2 results, they're out next week. Although it's steady, it's still only at that level that we can see going back to sort of the center of that chart, which was when we saw the lows around COVID. So it'll be really interesting to see if we see a bump in Q2, which we are seeing in some of our other surveys. Looking at that survey across sort of business size, we do see larger businesses with slightly higher business confidence than smaller businesses and startups. So again, looking at some of those patterns before, I think small businesses really need to see some more impact from Labour and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor as to what benefits they're going to bring to the smallest businesses. When we look at our other sort of monthly business tracker, which runs among 750 small businesses, 250 larger businesses, it has shown increasing confidence this year, but particularly since June. Those numbers 38 through to 42 running over the year up to March. Okay, it's increased a little bit. It's pretty steady overall. We did see a jump in optimism in terms of growth in June, and a decline in the figures expected in terms of businesses saying whether they're going to decline. So much more optimism in Q2, which is why I say that we need to see from the other survey what those Q2 results are going to look like. Very similar picture when they're asked what's the outlook for your industry sector. A big jump in optimism when it came to June. And as with that Market View survey, we do see larger businesses, again, more optimistic in terms of their own business and their industry sector as well. And then finally, we run for the London Chamber of Commerce their quarterly economic survey amongst 500 London businesses represented by size and sector. Released yesterday, these figures were. And again, we can see business confidence up in Q2 in terms of profitability, turnover, and company prospects overall, all continuing to rise, and actually to record levels when it comes to profitability. This is actually driven by the smallest businesses, so micro businesses. So maybe we are starting to see some of that optimism come through to some of those smallest businesses, certainly in the capital. However, that we're asking this question, like, how do you expect things to change over the coming months? This may be because they've been experiencing quite a lot of uncertainty in the years preceding this point. And then similarly, optimism for the London and UK economy continuing to rise. They're both at now a positive sort of balance level. When you ask, what's your expectations in terms of improve or decline over the next 12 months, more businesses are now likely to expect improvements rather than things to get worse. That's true of both micro businesses and smaller businesses. So yeah, that's the first time I think for 3 years I think both those measures have been in positive territory. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and obviously happy to answer any questions later. I think overall we're seeing maybe optimism seems to maybe be increasing. It's a little bit of wait and see from smaller businesses maybe. But I come back to that point that both the public and businesses now are really going to want to see, and probably quite quickly, some evidence of the positive change as the message from Labour, which did seem to cut through in the campaign period. There needs to be some evidence of that positive change materialising over the next few months.
Thank you, Ollie. Lots of interesting, illuminating insight. Everyone seems to be very interested, in particular at the kind of gender split, and actually how young people in particular are responding both politically and also engaging or otherwise. It would be great to be able to actually look at some of that information in a more segmented way, particularly the 18 to 35-year-old group. So I'll have a couple of requests for that. Equally too, one question here from David. What changes have larger businesses made in preparation for a Labour government? I'm not sure necessarily you'd have the answer to that. It's not something you'd track necessarily, but anecdotally, have you picked up anything in that?
I don't know. We didn't ask about it. We just asked that sort of headline, have you, haven't you? I suspect that I think the key difference we pulled out is that larger businesses are more likely to than smaller businesses. And I think that's just probably the fact that they're more likely to build in any changes in whether it's the government here or wider public policy into their plans going forward than smaller businesses. I think the very smallest businesses are probably going to be more on a sort of wait and see view of things rather than actively planning. But in terms of what those changes actually are, I don't know. I mean, we talked about, the likes of 0-hour contracts, fire rehire being scrapped by Labour, and there'll be other impacts as well from some of their policy areas. I suspect some of the larger businesses have been starting to plan for actually having to adapt to the policies as they're introduced, so they're not sort of being so reactive and can be more proactive about these things.
Great question here from Jeremy Stern. It seems amazing that under 18s cannot enter a prize promotion, but they can vote on the future of the nation. It would seem. There was an earlier point and was asked, I think, Jeremy, you asked about the 16 vote. It was covered, I think, in something that was mentioned by Ollie, which is it would appear initially that if they were to do that and make it available to 16-year-olds, the two beneficiaries would be both Labour and Reform.
Yeah.
Going back to your point, that males seem to be actually erring in that age group towards Reform, whilst females are more focused, obviously, on Labour, perhaps, and that's also quite interesting. Overall, what I think is fascinating is that the evidence you've shown us today very much seems to be listened to by Labour. They've responded very dramatically and hit the ground running. Obviously, they had a fair time to prepare for this, but it seems that they are doing all the right things and making the right noises and responding to some of the things that you've highlighted today. In particular, also young people. There was some various different takeaways yesterday from interviews that were done in Parliament, speaking to leading politicians from the Labour camp, who were talking about the need to listen to younger people and the need to actually reflect what they want. They clearly realise they're not engaged and they're more anxious than other groups. Okay, unless we have, hang on, we've got a few other questions. Do the stats tell us anything about marketers needing to use TikTok more? I think they do, Helen. I think, from what we were saying earlier on, it's a medium that obviously, in particular, the young people like, not exclusively, we've got people like myself pushing 60 who also are on TikTok. So, but it's very influential, and Reform used it very, very well. And it would be great to understand, actually, if we looked at, say, the French market in terms of anxiety now and actually gender split and attitudes towards the left and the right, whether we would see something similar to what you're experienced here. It's not a market you track at the moment, is it, Ollie?
It's not, no.
Okay, listen, conscious of time, we will come back to you because there's loads of questions coming in now. Do you think the rise in business confidence is due to Labour policies or just a change in government? I think from what you would have said, probably both, isn't it?
I think a bit of both. I think some of this rise in confidence will be kind of just hope that things are going to change and be better, because things have been, in the eyes of the public and businesses, quite bad for a long time. So there is some hope there, which is why I think it comes back to that point that Labour really need to provide some evidence and actually show real change for people quite quickly.
Yeah, I guess another thing is there always tends to be a bit of bounce, doesn't there, after an election, albeit this time the bounce is perhaps not going to be quite so high.
I think there is a bounce. I think we saw that people have voted largely to get the Conservatives out. They think that their time in government has run its course. They're poorer in terms of their pounds in their pocket. So yeah, they wanted Labour to come in on the whole, and that was obviously borne out in the landslide victory. But yeah, they keep coming back to this point. They need to see some evidence of that change coming through.
Yeah. Okay. So all to be proven and a lot of work to be done. Ollie, thank you very much again. I think it'd be really interesting when you do your next poll to see how people are reflecting and actually where there's big changes. Obviously, that took us up to the end of June. When's your next dip? End of July?
The business tracker runs monthly, and then the general public stuff we will be polling on an ongoing basis. But I think it will be the shift. There'll be a shift in what we're asking in terms of then the impact of Labour policies and general optimism. So that I think in a quarter in a quarter's time, we'd hopefully have some interesting trends on, their first 100 days in office.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much indeed. I now welcome to our panel today, Annabel, who's going to talk to us about actually how this affects agencies and agency life. Again, the data that she is presenting is for the last quarter, but there's some interesting insights there and also some interesting research that she's done outside of the tracker. So I will allow her the floor, and there we go.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thanks, Ollie. That was really, really interesting. Such an interesting week to be in business, my goodness. So in preparation for this today, I was speaking to agencies in the last couple of weeks about, how things were, to try and get an anecdotal overview as well as the people pulse. And there were lots of words coming like stasis, it's a sticky market, there's some struggle, lots of words beginning with S. And in fact, one agency referred to having been ghosted by a number of clients with which they had proposals sitting with them, and they'd literally been ghosted. So it doesn't just happen in the relationship world, it happens in business too. But this week, when I repeated those calls and some similar agencies and others, there was definitely glimmers of hope. It's like the tinder had been lit, and a great phrase, briefs had been unlocked, which I loved. And one agency had had 3 briefs which they'd been sitting on and waiting for the go, and all 3 had the go button pressed. And that relates to Ollie's point. I think larger businesses feeling more confident, perhaps prepared for Labour government, and pressing the go button. I think a couple of large banks, they unlocked briefs with a particular ad agency that we work with. So glimmers of hope. I hope you're feeling that in your agencies, and it might take a time for it to trickle down, that confidence, but here's hoping. So as Stephen said, I did some desk research available to all of you if you did the same, but I just thought I'd put it all in one slide for you. The current state of the UK creative agency market. And this was drawn from various research from Data City, Creative Review, Aquent UK, Creative Pool, and the Creative Industries Report. And these were all out in the last few months. And in the notes to this section that you'll receive in the presentation, you'll see those sources. So you can go direct to the source material. But allegedly, the market performance is currently at 14.1 billion turnover, expected to grow to 16.1 billion, and that's across all creative agencies in the UK. So phenomenal opportunity for the creative sector. These figures, I discussed this with Stephen, they might be slightly inflated just because of the cost of stuff, and the figures might be inflated, but still a good pool to be going after. Those agencies that seem to be doing well seem to be having higher levels of innovation and adapting their products and services, and hyper-personalisation still wins the day, and collaboration. So those agencies that are working with other agencies, which is a great plug for Pimento, because there's a lot of talent within the Pimento family. So are you making those relationships and collaborating with others to respond to briefs? Mental health and workforce retention, still huge, and you'll see this in the People Pulse figures. Mental health is still a big issue in our sector. It's not life and death what we do, but clearly agency life can be stressful, and with cost of living and work pressures, it's so important, again, to make sure you're addressing that within your agency. Industry attrition, individuals still seeking a better work-life balance. I think the pendulum swung from very much an employer's world to an employee's world, and I think that pendulum is juddering back, with employers perhaps demanding more of their slightly stressed workforce. But those agencies that have got really clear flexible working policies do tend to retain their staff better. And I'll delve into these figures in our deck as well. AI, we haven't actually asked a question on that in the People Pulse, but clearly it's going to keep playing its part. Those agencies that can streamline repetitive tasks are going to become more efficient, and then enhancing that efficiency and then using that extra time that's freed up to explore how creative you can become, other creative routes using AI, I think will start to really come to the fore in 2024 and 2025. Government support with a caveat. This research was shared by Creative Industries pre-election, and I think 1 billion in tax reliefs and incentives were announced in the spring budget. Whether Rachel Reeves will support that going forward, yet to be seen. But I'm loving the positivity that Ollie shared in his deck, and let's hope it trickles through, as I said. So here's the People Pulse. For those of you that don't know what this is, we work with the Alliance of Independent Agencies, and we go out to all members and that link is available to any independent agency to click on. And if any of your agencies have 6 or more responses, then we provide a tailored report for your agency. So you can see Q2 2024, which was, where are we, end of June, we had 992 individual responses. That's 58 agencies with 42 giving more than 6 responses. So 42 individual reports went out. So as we go through the data, you'll see this is the aggregate data. It's all anonymised. We don't know who said what. But bear in mind, it's nearly 1,000 independent agency staff. So a really good spread of thought and opinion here. So the first question, and these are 10 questions we ask every quarter. Do you feel pride in working at your agency? And again, these figures don't change enormously, but individual agencies, when they get their tailored report, clearly see some changes if they put our consultancy into play. And then on the right, we just pick out 1 or 2 comments in green or red. Green meaning the positive, and that's the gold standard. That's what you as an agency leader want to be aspiring to. And then the red is where there's clearly room for improvement. So if you're getting comments, if you're thinking about your own agency right now, are your people saying they're incredibly proud of the work you do? And are you working hard to deliver amazing projects for your clients and feeling pride in that work? And of course, pride comes through a feedback loop. You need to let your team know that they're doing great, and to share that feedback publicly, so that pride is instilled in people. And then the negative comment, I have nothing against the agency and enjoy my work here, but I don't feel a sense of pride. So hard to gauge what that person actually needs, but worth listening to these comments. The gold dust is always in the qualitative. We share just a smattering of that, but if you take part, you would get access to all the verbatims. Respect and trust. Are you encouraged to voice your opinions and trusted to get on or do a good job? We can see that's around 2/3 saying yes, I am, with about 1/3 saying for the most part unsure, not really, or not at all. Now, if you've got 1 in 100 of your team saying not at all, something is wrong. And it might be that you can identify that person, but don't try to. What you're trying to instill is a sense that you have a culture where people can A, make mistakes, B, come to you with constructive solutions about how they could do things differently going forward, and how you as a team can improve processes. But again, the gold standard here, we always have the opportunity to voice our thoughts and opinions with anyone in the team. So really important to take this back to base. If you discuss this as a leadership team, is that genuinely the kind of culture you've got? Or is there more of a people don't fess up and mistakes get buried and come out in the woodwork when your client puts it out for tender? In the red here, there's a fear to voice opinions, as if it's not aligned with management, you create a target for yourself. That's quite damning. And again, a watch point, do not try to identify who said this, but do you think you've got any voices in your team that might be feeling that way? And what can you do as a leadership to try and shift that culture? Because this all plays into retention and attrition. If you not feel trust, pride and respect within your agency, you're going to jump ship to somewhere where you are going to feel that. Enjoyment, lovely question. How has your experience of work changed in terms of enjoyment and fun in the last 3 months? Be very interesting, as Ollie said, what happens next quarter after the election, whether there'll be more of a sense of hope and optimism and briefs being unlocked, so that there's more fun stuff to get stuck in with and work to do. Our agency is always trying to find ways to get us out of the office to do things that will help with our mental health in the workplace and to get a regular break from the hectic day-to-day. So again, these are great comments, could be used for awards entries as well, I always say, or in your recruitment materials. But again, is that the kind of thing that your team is saying? In red, the work life has changed quite a bit. With more clients being onboarded, it's far harder to find the time to have fun and enjoyment. Fun and enjoyment doesn't seem to change enormously. I think it's tracking upwards slightly from Q1 to Q2, 3 percentage points more, saying more fun, but just over half saying about the same, and a fifth less fun. It's never been fun, and I'd rather not say. We thought there'd be a spike in the run up to the end of Q4, that people would be work weary, but it's holding steady around the 5th mark. D&I, the Alliance, of course, do lots of training in the D&I space and always ask that question, is it dropping off the agenda? We've only got 28% saying it's really good. about half saying it's good. And there are plenty of courses out there. If you're not doing the baby steps to get this in place, then I really recommend looking at the Alliance's courses on this. I've never experienced such a diverse workplace that embraces different cultures and takes the time to celebrate them all. A really lovely comment there. Have you got a D&I champion in your business that could help advise you on what you could be doing if you're paralysed with fear about how to address this? But we all know procurement, looking increasingly at your D&I record, it's not just a feel-good factor, it's commercially important that you're on top of this. We're not diverse, which is reflective of the area we're based in, but equally D&I is not valued by the leadership here. It may not be reflective of the area that you're working in, but your clients surely will have a D&I need. So definitely a watch point there. And it's dipped slightly. And I think cost of living and pressures on agency may have made this drop off the agenda a little. L&D, we know that agencies that continue to invest in learning, development and training of teams during challenging times emerge more agile and ready to face that new workload that's coming at you. So do where you can offer training and development. And the challenge we often hear from agency staff is that there's never time, or that it's offered to them and they just can't do it because they feel the client work comes first. So are you offering bite-sized learning? Are you ensuring your juniors are getting access to seniors so that they're learning on the job in the way that it used to be pre-COVID? So checking in on learning and development needs and ensuring line managers are properly trained in order to spot the strengths and weaknesses of their line reports and know which training to point them in the direction of. And then we've got a lovely one here. I can pick and choose what suits my development needs. So are you tailoring your training per person, not by grade within the business? And then here's that comment I've mentioned here. It's very hard to find the time to actually do it. Well, as a leadership, then you really have to help them find time to do it, because if they drop off the curve on learning and development, A, you won't have that workforce that you need, and B, they'll jump ship to somewhere where they do feel they're going to get that development. Sustainability, I think this is much like D&I. We've just got quarters saying that their approach to sustainability in relation to climate change is really good, with 3/4 quite good, unsure, not very good. So that last two, one, not 11% of not very good and poor. So that's 1 in 10 agency staff. That's over 100 people on our survey saying that they don't rate it, which is clearly a depressing picture. With 4 Green MPs in Parliament, perhaps there'll be some more business incentives to go green, and certainly the very basic stuff on recycling and reducing carbon footprint of staff travelling and so forth needs to be in place. Someone mentioning a platinum EcoVadis status. So not mentioning B Corp here, but platinum EcoVadis status. I'm not familiar with that, but worth jamming up on it if you don't know. And if any of these comments interest you, we can potentially put you forward to the agency that had that comment, so we could track that agency down if you want to find out more. It's all about collaboration. Leadership and communication. We're in the creative sector, and communication clearly is a big central part of what we do. So to not have 100% saying clearly the communication is good within the agency, or in terms of the leadership communication, is a bit depressing. We've got 86% saying really clearly or quite clearly, but that still leaves this section down here, and that's held steady all the way across. So work to be done there, I would say. It's part of our day job to be able to communicate clearly and to ensure that message has landed, of people to play it back to you what their understanding of it is. Quarterly updates are great, and weekly huddles, you know, basic stuff here. If that's not happening, then think again. During the financial meetings, it feels as though there's confusion in the direction of the company and seems to be on a decline. It makes me worry for my job, as though redundancy may be on the way. So confusion, that can be dealt with by having a pre-financial team leadership meeting that makes sure the messaging is absolutely nailed, so that there is clear direction shared by the leadership. So again, these figures will vary very enormously. There's quite a range within individual agencies on this, but the average is at 40%, saying really clearly. Mental health score, we've got some trends coming here where it dips at Q4. Just before Christmas, it dipped to -9 back in 2022, and again at -16 in 2023. And it seems to increase -16 to -6 beginning of the new year. We get a little swing upwards, so everyone feels a little bit more positive. New year, new me. They've been to the gym for a few sessions, definitely feeling like they've had a break and they're going to make a go of it. But again, then it starts to track down again. So it's across the NPS scale you're familiar with, -100 to +100. 0 is the happy point, or at least good. Anything above 0 is deemed good. And we really want to be seeing it climbing into the 10s and 20s. But the most we've ever had in this industry amongst around 1,000 team is +4. So clearly mental health and well-being is a huge watch point in agency land still. Future employment, I think this is a brilliant question. Do you intend to remain at your current agency for the next 12 months? I mean, bloody hell, 25% are saying, I'm thinking about leaving. No, I intend to join another agency. No, I intend to leave the industry. Or I'd rather not say, which for me isn't a yes. So 25% sitting on the fence or about to go. So again, play that back into your own agency. You might have a team of 50. That means 12.5 people are not saying absolutely yes, if we look at this as an aggregate. So what are you doing to make sure you retain your lifeboat crew, those that you see as succession management, your star players, your hunter-gatherers? What are you doing to make sure that you're looking after their mental health, giving them a reason to be at work, learning and developing, and having purpose in your agency that makes people proud to work there? That's the kind of summing up of all these, the positives across the questions we've asked. What more can you be doing to make sure we feed into this, creating a bigger number than 75% in your individual agency? Cap on salary is a sticking point for me. There's literally no room for progression. So what can you do beyond salary that entices people? Is it more time for learning, diversifying their skill set so that cap on salary is released, or giving them more responsibility, and encouraging entrepreneurship so that they bring in revenues for which they could be rewarded? All sorts of creative ideas, but use these as a springboard for what you could be doing differently. Recognition. So this was a new question that was requested by the members. We ask each time what more do they want to know about. Do you feel that you get recognition for your contribution to the agency? Again, it's a pretty easy win this. People, it goes back to star charts when we're at primary school, doesn't it? We want to get that sticky star. What are you doing in your agency that recognises people's effort and their contribution? Is it a public town hall meeting? We used to send handwritten cards to home addresses, which went down very well, but also that public recognition in front of the whole team, either in person or online. And we've got 76% saying, yes, I do, for the most part. So again, this sort of slightly disenfranchised lot of 25%-ish who feel that they are not being recognised. This is an interesting one. The red comment here: we don't pull out individual contributions a lot. Feels like sometimes more concerned with offending others than celebrating. Now that really is a challenge, isn't it? So have you got a culture where by calling someone out, it's deemed divisive? That needs looking at. So again, hand on heart, are you able to reward people without feeling like you're putting others down? That's something to question. And then finally, the next two slides are 10 bullet points. We asked an open question about life in independent agencies. What haven't we asked about, but you think is important to share or inquire? And these are the top 10. And some of them were covered in different surveys that the Alliance already run. So we're able to point that out in our feedback to them. But I think the one that, and you'll get this deck, so these might be some questions you might be interested in, but the one that I think did it for me was on the final slide: technological changes and AI, and agency purpose and contribution. These last two, I think purpose and contribution, yes, you should get the right salary. Yes, you should have learning development, but what are you going to work to do? Is it just to drive that profit, or are you doing something that's got greater value in the world? And as a leadership team, are you providing that opportunity? That's maybe a very personal view on things, but I think those agencies that have got a clear purpose beyond delivering for clients and actually doing something that puts back, they tend to increase their retention and their staff mental health and happiness. Technological changes in AI, I think we should definitely be asking a question about that, and I think we'll see that in the next quarter Be interesting to know on the call here how many people are actually embracing AI and using it to streamline those repetitive tasks and to increase their creativity. It would be good to get some metrics on that. So that is a whistle-stop tour because I know I'm on a tight timeline. This is the summary of all the movers and shakers. It's not quite the Euro finals table, but it's similarly interesting in that we've got Pride going down to, and you can see all the changes through that second column. And then the questions on the right are just thoughts that we have had that you might want to use if you were to just take this one slide back to your next board meeting as discussion points. And you could pick a question and choose one a month to go through, just to elevate the kind of conversations you're having to look at the emotional intelligence around the boardroom table leadership group, to then play back into your team. So those are some of the thoughts that we've had. So I will say thank you. You're all really lovely, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Annabel. I mean, I think your last slide is a really good aid, and I would urge all agency owners to actually use that with their board. And equally too, remember that you can participate, and as long as you get, I think it's 6 people in your agency to respond, you get your own little survey back.
Exactly, yeah. I wouldn't call it a little survey. I'd call it a compelling.
I said your own little survey. I mean, not little in the sense of it being little, but you will get a personalised snapshot of your agency, and I'll see how it compares and contrasts with the normal.
Exactly. You'll have your own data versus the aggregate data. And of course, that's where it gets interesting, because then if you put measures in place to address where you might be underperforming, you can see that track upwards. And it's a brilliant tool to play back to your team to say, we're really listening. You said, we heard, we're taking action. And that's what this is all about. So I hope it's useful to you.
It's free, isn't it, Annabel? Is it free doing the independent, the Alliance paper?
Apparently free, yes. That's why I've got threadbare cushions on my sofa.
The most important word in marketing. It's free. Brilliant. Thank you once again. We're now I'm going to do a very brief update on business development and then tell you what's happening from our side. There were a couple of questions from Mark and also from Jeremy Stern, which I will direct back to Annabel so she can get back to you directly, if that's okay. A couple of really interesting things about the idea of actually broadening the understanding of what we mean about D, E, and I, and choosing the concept of belong. So I think that's fascinating. And also, to what extent, obviously, do the retention stats reflect churn in general within the industry, which we know to be reasonably high. Although, actually, interestingly, churn in the last 18 months overall has been quite low amongst employees, not necessarily employers, who are now obviously having to make people redundant again, I'm afraid. So, quick update from me. Let's start. And if you could drive the charts for me, T, that'd be fantastic. So, as you know, we do this twice a year. I want to just remind you of the different products and services that we are promoting on your behalf to brands out there, because you all fit in sort of different areas of our spectrum in terms of what we do. First and foremost, we're known for our marketing services. I think last count, we have 97 different marketing services, and day in, day out, that's what we do. We promote, we build new interest in our business and your businesses through the activities which I'll describe in a moment. But a real focus on that. And in fact, our website has been transformed to reflect and focus on brands looking for bespoke marketing solutions. Consultancy, another big part of our proposition. Number of consultants on today's call. We now market that as a product in its own right, both in terms of interim and also looking at fractional consultants. And we've got a whole campaign around that at the moment. If we then look at technology, as you know, we have a very strong tech stack, and we have a lot of people who are, say, professional in different aspects of tech design and tech delivery. So we've been doing that now pretty much for 10 years now, and Vinny's been leading that charge, and we've been out there basically promoting that to prospective clients with some success. We launched this particular proposition very recently, agency search, and we've stuck it out there for 2 reasons. First and foremost, we do it for free, and something obviously if you go to the AAR and Oyster Catchers and elsewhere, they will charge clients anywhere between £20,000 and £50,000. We do that stuff for free, and it also means that we can obviously generate new business opportunities for you. We also are incredibly transparent with our clients. We don't only look at Pimento members in that situation. Obviously, we have to look at the wider sphere if we don't have the talent within. But you can be assured that in most instances we do. And if we don't, it allows us to go out and find new agencies where we can focus. And talking talent, that's our last part of our plug now. And we are now helping brands both with short-term requirements as well as longer-term requirements. So it's a pretty full service. And I just want you to be aware of where you fit within that spectrum and how we can support you in your business by generating more business in those areas. T, next chart, please. So quick update on new business development. As you know, back end of last year, we changed our strategy. We appointed Paul Hamilton, who's on our call today. We'll be talking shortly to help us with our marketing activities. We take the following activities to heart, and we've got 4 people pretty much dedicated to this now. So both quarterly events, which you'll be aware of, we campaign around, for example, AI, and we'll create a webinar, a podcast, a thought paper, and we use those to be able to attract new business opportunities to the network. If you haven't got involved in those, if you haven't been asked to contribute towards a thought paper, please do let us know. We put these together at least 6 months in advance, and we've always got a good idea of what's coming down the line and like to get as many members involved as possible. We've been pushing hard, extending our social reach with a particular focus on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're about to invest in a new campaign, content campaign. We're ever trying to refresh that. And we also are very keen within that campaign to showcase our members. So over the next few months, we will be trying to get to you to be able to actually get your expert opinions in your particular areas so that we can feature you in our social campaigns. The campaigns themselves are targeted around the 5 service pillars I showed you just now. So we don't just do marketing services, we'll also look at all the other areas. And the other thing we've done this year is very much invest in data from various different sources, both from within Pimento, partners that we work with, and elsewhere. The other thing that we have done, obviously, is look to Paul to help us in terms of meeting setting and cold calling. But where you can help yourselves, and this is so important, particularly obviously in tight markets, is on referrals. But if there is an opportunity, if your client asks you, do you do X? Before you say no, remember you're part of the network that can do it, and you're low commission for making that referral. So never say no to any brief is what we say. Always pick up the phone, speak to your partner director, send me an email. We will always find a qualified partner to work with you on that particular part of your request from your clients. And equally too, for your own marketing needs, you need a new website, you need some copy, you need some social, you need some SEO. Please look within. It always upsets me when we're part of a community and agencies look outside of Pimento before even giving another member the opportunity to pitch. Next slide, please, T. Right, quick review of H1. So we've had 105 new business opportunities in this period. Those have been driven by our own organic marketing activity, as well as referrals between members, as well as the work that Paul's been doing. We've had 41 new prospect clients so far year to date, 42 new business briefs with a win rate of around about 61. And the estimated total value of these business opportunities is 3.3 million. That's running ahead of last year for the same period. So it's certainly heading in the right direction. However, to the point that Annabel gave earlier on, there is still a lot of ghosting going out there. Clients are talking good games, are wanting to engage and talk to agencies and not following through. Or worse still, you get to the proposal stage, you put in 2 or 3 proposals and they pull the brief. Suddenly the money is no longer available. They've got to focus on other things. I think this is a reflection of what Ollie was talking about earlier on. There is sentiment will rise, people will be more positive, but it's going to take a little while for it to actually filter through to actually people spending pounds, shillings, and God knows where else, groats, and actually starting to invest in marketing again. So my view is, you've got to kiss an awful lot of frogs at the moment. You've got to get out there. You've got to basically put yourself about. You've got to try very hard, and don't get despondent, because actually it's about tenacity, and you have to be prepared to basically push, and don't be afraid to be pushed away. Clients will start to hide, use imaginative ways and creative ways to connect with them. and don't be afraid to follow them across other mediums. Right, Paul. Paul, if you could kind of give us an outline as to the plans that you've got and what you've been doing for Pimento and its agencies in the last half year.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. Nice to meet you all. So, yeah, I mean, essentially, my job is about pipeline development, and I've been on board with Pimento for, I think, since the turn of the year. And we're organising our prospecting through, I guess, two channels of activity directly dialed into companies that we want to talk to. And one of those strands is, I guess, tactical or intelligence-led, which is being alive and vigilant to company change that may be a catalyst to a review. So it's all the old favourites like new marketing director joining, company performance, merger and acquisition. And we're plugging into a lot of data sources to anticipate companies that may be in the market for what we do. In addition to that, I'm remaining vigilant to stuff that I pick up through my personal network. And then in parallel to that, we are running very extensive email campaigns which lead with thought leadership or perspective on a topical challenge. And then there's phone follow-up over the back of that. And that's really designed to try and understand or establish those businesses that may have a propensity to need our services, particularly within the short term. So, so far we've got a very robust database, and we've segmented that by clients that envisage a need for what we do in the short term, which is 3 months, and long term. And also we've got a very good reception, I think, to the Pimento proposition. I think it's certainly resonating with clients in terms of, I mean, one of the recurring patterns actually is that there is a frustration with the big agencies because they're seen as expensive, not collaborative, and also getting juniors cutting their teeth at the client's expense. So that plays to ourselves. So we are getting a good response. And we've had some really good meetings, I think, Stephen. I think you'd agree with that. We're waiting decisions on a number of opportunities.
It's much bigger brands too. I think, we kind of lifted ourselves up from where we had traditionally looked, which is sort of secondary or tertiary brands. And we're now basically talking to, global brands, leading sectors. So that frustration with the group agencies is continuing, and we can actually benefit from that. If there are activities that in your own new business and you feel that actually a broader approach, working and collaborating with other members, or indeed working with Paul, please do drop a line to me and we can see how we can work together on that. And as I say, as the hour comes up to midday, we do need to continue to collaborate on referrals. Last final 2 slides and I'll let you all go to your days. Please, on your membership, do engage. We've got a 6 p.m. club tomorrow night. I think we've got about 80 people registered. There's still room. It's in London. It's a cracking event. It's free. There's no reason, if you're a London and South East member, you should be there. Come down. It's going to be fantastic. It'll go on the board in a minute if you haven't got the details, but it's in Holborn and it's being hosted by Agency Works. Do keep your portals up to date. A number of agencies haven't actually kept their portals up to date. You're not going to get referrals unless you keep your portals up to date, because we don't know how your service proposition is changing. Do track all your referrals. It's really easy to do now. You can do it on the actual do it actually on the portal. You don't have to actually fill out a silly form anymore. You just do it on the form on the portal. Do respond to briefs. You will be surprised that when we actually offer opportunities to agencies and they do not respond, zip, hear nothing, and we have to chase them for a response. If you want to use Pimento to generate new business, then actually be really happy to if you could respond. Do also communicate with the rest of your team. This is a membership you have for your agency and all your team. If you're a one-person agency, it's you and yourself, but anyone else who's in an agency of more than one, everyone in the agency is open to get involved and come to our events. We have lots of them, particularly for younger members. We have Club 30. And do recognise you're part of an independent movement. Support each other. This is a unique community. We give clients a entry point, a door into the internet, into the 25,000 independent agencies in the UK. So make sure that you are supporting that community. As I say, do give back with referrals and your time. Last slide, and I'll stop nagging. It's not about nagging, it's about helping. Marketing Spice. Next event, 25th September, it's all gone anti-social. We're going to be talking about actually how social media is changing, how that whole environment basically is now, like so many other channels, now got so full that actually how difficult it is actually to get stand out there. And we're going to have some specialists and leading authorities talking about that. The BD Club happens every 6 to 8 weeks. We get really good numbers on that. It's our business development opportunity for you, agency owners and heads of business development. Don't forget also, we're now just introduced Pimento Fuse roundtables. These are online groups every month, smaller groups and a lot of fun. Club 30. And also our social side. A number of you on this call have been on some of our events this year. Networking, we've got one coming up in Windsor in 2 weeks' time. The Pimento golf events across the year. It's not just for the boys. Let's get more lady golfers out there. Automotive, it's not much for the boys. In fact, actually, the winner this year of the Pimento treasure hunt, who's on this call, A turned up without a classic car, but B won it and beat all the boys. Good for her. Fantastic. We need more of that. But yeah, other social things that you want to do to make things stickier, do tell us about it. If you want to go horse racing and you want to do client events, do let us know. 6 p.m. between now and the end of the year, we're all over the place. As you can see, we're going to Glasgow for the very first time. We're back in Bath. We're in Manchester again and in London. So no reason not to come to our clubs. And equally, if you don't get out at night, we've got the 5 p.m. club, which is next up on the 5th of September. And next, but by no far least, oh yes, on the round table, it's going to be Annabel, of course, on the next round table on 10 a.m. on the 12th of July, talking about customer retention. We all focus on new business. We don't focus on retaining our clients and loving our clients. So Annabel will be talking all about all of that. So that's it. I just wanted to say thank you very much to all of you who attended today. And sorry we've overrun by 4 minutes. I'd like to thank in particular Oliver and Annabel. Great session. Hope you found it very useful. We will be sharing all the charts and all the sizes. And if you've got any questions of particular nature, then do shoot those direct to Annabel and Ollie. If you don't have their email addresses, just drop me a line. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible tomorrow night in Holborn at 6 p.m. And there is a link, I believe, in the chat box now where you can basically follow that link and join us. There you go. Have a great day and see you all very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.